Tartarus Bound by Kai Herberts. The Titan hid behind one of the columns lest he be spotted by the patrolling guards. His heart pounded in his chest. The prospect of stealing from the Olympians was both terrifying and exciting. The conversation between members of the patrol grew faint as they moved on to a different section of the palace. He waited for a while longer until he was sure they were far away enough before proceeding toward his prize. For the heist, he had taken off his footwear in favor of stealth. This precaution entailed a measure of discomfort, since the warmth of his body seeped into the cold marble floor beneath him. Without making a sound, he reached a door that towered above him, but the lock was on his level and within reach. Rummaging through his leather coat, he produced a set of lockpicks from a hidden compartment. For a moment, he considered using an ordinary lockpick to either improve or hone his skill, depending on how long it took to open the door. However, he could not afford to get caught and instead opted for a magical skeleton key. Once inserted into the opening, multiple key bits grew from the featureless rod. In a mere moment, the key became a perfect match for the lock. With bated breath, the Titan turned the key. Even though he took care not to make any noise, the retreating massive bars on the other side of the door caused an infernal din. At least, that was his impression. The Titan stood hunched over at the door, as if that made him more difficult to see. He looked back and forth with nervous eyes. When no alarm was raised, he focused on the door once more. While the noise, which probably sounded louder to him than it actually was, continued, he kept turning the key until it hit resistance. The Titan withdrew his skeleton key. He placed it back into the secret pocket that was sewn into his coat. With both hands he pushed on the massive door. It swung open with a deafening creak. The room beyond was also lined with white pillars. At the opposite end, a few stairs of solid stone led up to a platform, and on it his coveted prize rested, a large dish containing the secret of the gods. He swallowed because his throat had become dry. Experience as a thief and trickster prevented him from running headlong. He snuck from column to column. At every stop he surveyed his surroundings, looking for traps. As he neared the pedestal, he noticed that the pillars next to the stairs bore stone faces that looked directly at the foot of the stairs. He suspected those were magical scrying contraptions and moved out of sight to the rear of the platform. Jumping up, he grabbed the ledge of the pedestal and hoisted himself up. He stood before the dish in awe. On the inside, the tongues of an ever-burning fire danced. The Titan Prometheus took a vial from his pocket. With a quick swipe, he captured the essence of fire. He plopped down the cork onto the vial, satisfied at a job well done. After his escape from Zeus' domain, Prometheus steered his skybark down to Earth. Prometheus moored his boat at a cove and disembarked. Whistling a happy tune, he sought out a tribe of humans. The creatures looked downright pitiful with their grimy, bearded faces. Nevertheless, he looked down on them with the love of a father when they knelt down in front of him. "Lord Prometheus, you have come," their leader said. Even though their primitive language mostly consisted of grunts, Prometheus could make sense of it. After all, the humans were his proudest creation. "Rise, my children," he said. "I have brought you a great gift." As they let out "oh" and "ah" sounds of awestruck admiration, he waggled around the vial that held Zeus's fire. "Tonight we shall feast, for I am going to introduce you to the arcane art of creating fire." The savage men roared their approval. They led Prometheus back to their village. He listened to and shared their laughter and stories until the hunters returned with the day's game. Prometheus wasted no time. He showed the men the powerful cleansing properties of fire. Pure, undiluted wonder showed in their expressions when they bit down on their first portion of well-cooked meat. The Olympians looked down on his creation, but he loved these simple creatures with their uncomplicated lives. After the meal, they laid out the bones as an offering to the gods. Prometheus smiled at that, fond memories of getting the better of Zeus once more on his mind. Eventually, he clapped his hands to draw attention of the leader. Your tribe has flourished, and it pleases me to no end that you worship the gods in an appropriate way. All thanks to you, the leader said, bowing so far down that Prometheus worried his forehead might touch the ground. Today I showed you fire, but I promised more than that. You shall learn how to create fire. There, go get that branch. Prometheus pointed at a tree limb that had broken off and lay on the ground. The man did not understand, but he obeyed the command. He stood before the fire expectantly. Go ahead, Prometheus said. Hold the branch into the fire. The man did as he was told, and awestruck chatter rose around him when he walked around with the burning wooden stick. He allowed the fur-clad wild man to prance triumphantly around the camp, getting used to the flame he carried. Then Prometheus joined him and took the stick from the man. He tossed it into the fire pit. All eyes were on him as he kicked sand onto the fire and smothered the flames. What would you do if you didn't have a vial of eternal fire? He asked the assembled men. They did not know the answer, of course. He smiled again. His humans were primitive, true, but they were also curious and resourceful. Prometheus knew that they would eventually discover the secret of fire, now that they were aware of its existence. Although there is merit in working things out on your own, he had set out to teach them the arcane arts, and so he did. If Zeus doesn't ignite trees with his lightning, then you could also create fire on your own. Let me tell you about flint. Prometheus awoke when he heard cracking branches from a careless person's footsteps. He looked to the sleeping humans and their extinguished fire. Earlier they had renewed the flames under his guidance. Now that they no longer needed to perpetually feed it, the humans had allowed it to go out. They rested assured in their knowledge that they could start it again if they desired to do so. He rose to meet the approaching people. A moment later, 2 Olympian guards armed with swords approached the camp. Prometheus, you are under arrest! Around him, the humans awoke from their slumber. They reacted to the hostile tone of the Olympians and waved their spears at them in a menacing way. Prometheus smiled at the swordsmen. As you can see, you are outnumbered. One of the guards wrinkled his nose. How can you stand the stench of these savages? I think I'm going to be ill. The other guard narrowed his eyes. Don't be a fool, Prometheus. There may only be 2 of us, but we are better armed and better trained than these creatures. I ask you, will you come peacefully? A tug on his sleeve alerted Prometheus to the presence of the human leader. My lord, the savage man said, do these men bother you? Shall we slay them in your honor? Prometheus patted the man's hand. There is no need. It already honors me that you are willing to defend me. However, I am capable of looking after myself. I shall accompany them to Zeus' domain. But, my lord, what will happen to you? The leader asked. Will we see you again? I do not know, Prometheus said, but it does not matter. The important thing is that you know the secret of fire. Go and wield it to the benefit of all. As the leader grunted in affirmation and withdrew, Prometheus extended his arms with his wrists held together. I will indeed accompany you on my own accord. Lead the way. At the palace, Prometheus was ambushed by a rat-faced Zeus. Contrary to the images that circulated, the real Zeus had a slightly disheveled look about him with a scraggly beard and wild hair. The paunch of his belly documented his taste in opulent feasts and sweet wine. Prometheus towered a solid 10 inches above the Olympian god. You, Zeus bellowed, you have swindled me for the last time! Prometheus did not even flinch at the outburst. Zeus' tantrums were well known. Whatever do you mean, honorable Zeus? The god pointed at Prometheus with a pudgy finger. You know full well what I'm talking about. You stole my fire, and what's worse, you shared it with those filthy humans. Oh, I might have, Prometheus said. He shot an insolent smile at Zeus. But I won't admit to anything. Can you prove your accusations? The god's features darkened, and his skin took on a shade of even deeper red. This is the last straw, my friend. Zeus held up his index finger. First, you tricked me into leaving the best parts of the animals to humans, with the bones and scraps going to the gods, supposedly as a token of worship. Next, the god raised his middle finger. Then you steal fire. But the final insult is lying to me about it. Zeus raised his ring finger, holding up 3 fingers in total. In my defense, Prometheus planned to lull Zeus in with a charming explanation of what was going on, but the god interrupted him. No! Be quiet and listen, Zeus said. You've disobeyed me for the last time. I'm tired of your little schemes and dread the... But mighty Zeus, Prometheus said as he started another attempt to placate the raging god. Be quiet! Zeus stared at him with madness in his eyes. He extended his arm toward Prometheus. An instant later, a bolt of lightning shot toward the Titan. A deafening roar of thunder accompanied the impact. Muscles spasming, Prometheus flew backward. He smashed against one of the white pillars. Still stunned from the bolt, he nevertheless felt that he had broken some bones. Prometheus fell to the ground, and smoke rose from the smoldering dark spot on his chest. Mighty Zeus, he said with a croaking voice, I bow to your wisdom, and gladly accept a term in the prison of Tartarus. Zeus approached the fallen Titan. The god had a malicious glint in his eyes. Prometheus' ears were still ringing from the thunder, but somehow he managed to hear what Zeus told him. As you said, I can't prove anything. Therefore, I won't send you to Tartarus. Your punishment will be carried out on Earth, among those wild men that you adore so much. Panic rose inside of Prometheus. Mighty Zeus, you can't! Oh, trust me, I can, Zeus said. He yanked Prometheus up by his hair, then flung him into the arms of the palace guards. Be gone! Stripped of his coat and power, the nude Prometheus was chained to a rock somewhere on Earth. One of the guards approached the Titan. He showed the captive Prometheus a birdcage. Zeus isn't content with merely imprisoning you. Here's your real punishment. Inside of the cage sat an eagle, with which the guards released. The animal tried to hack off the guard's finger, but the man swiftly withdrew. Instead, the bird of prey descended on the helpless Prometheus and began to tear open the Titan's skin with its beak. Prometheus cried out as the eagle began to pick at his liver. The guards withdrew and left Prometheus to his fate. Thanks to his supernatural healing abilities, his liver and torn skin grew back during the night. On each new morning, the sadistic bird drew blood with its beak, tormenting the chained Titan. Prometheus expected to grow accustomed to the continuous assault. Instead, his rejuvenated tissue was particularly tender. He resigned himself to being captive until the end of days, or at least until his chains had become brittle enough for him to break. After decades of waiting and being ripped apart, something unexpected happened. His humans were no longer the savage men that Prometheus had created. A longboat appeared in the distance. Through the haze of pain, Prometheus focused on its approach. The boat moored in the distance, and a hero climbed the rocks. When the man reached Prometheus, the eagle attacked, but the hero fought off the bird. With angry screams, the eagle retreated. It circled Prometheus and his rescuer for a while before eventually flying away. I thank you for rescuing me, Prometheus said. The man smiled. He raised his sword that he had used to drive away the eagle. The blade crashed down on the chains, splitting them in half. This is what heroes do. No need to thank me. Prometheus rubbed his aching wrists. He admired the buff man with his curly hair. Regardless, you freed me and have earned my gratitude. What is your name? I'm Heracles, champion of the downtrodden. I am the Titan Prometheus. Zeus himself cast me out and banished me from his palace. The eagle you chased away constituted my punishment. Heracles rubbed the beard on his chin. I see. It is a strange world. Since he had missed key developments on Earth and the realms beyond, Prometheus was inclined to agree. The world is peculiar indeed. He wondered whether there was more to Heracles' remarks, however. Is there anything in particular you're referring to? I'm just thinking, Heracles said. He walked around on the rocky plateau, pointing at the Titan with his sword, and then swiping the weapon in an arc at the surrounding landscape. You are of supernatural origin. If anything, you should be imprisoned in Hades or Tartarus, yet you remain here on Earth. Several mortals, on the other hand, are spending their days in Tartarus. What? Prometheus felt anger rising inside of him. The gall of that Zeus knows no bounds. How many are there? I know of at least two, Heracles said. Tantalus and Sisyphus were mortal kings, and they were both sent off by Zeus himself. Prometheus straightened at the prospect of interceding on behalf of his subjects. I must free them. Heracles raised his left hand. Before you do anything rash, consider this. They were both bad people. They deserve punishment. Of course, Prometheus said, I can agree with that if they were wicked men. However, mortals should answer to mortal courts. This is not a matter fit for Zeus' judgment. I have to break them out. Heracles looked troubled. Are you sure that you're not just doing it to spite Zeus? Prometheus smiled. Perhaps there is an element of that as well. However, friend Heracles, what I said is also true. You cannot negate a true statement with another nugget of truth. So it is settled. I will go because I cannot not go. Heracles bowed. Very well. Safe journey and good luck. He threw his blade into the air. It rotated around, and Heracles caught the tip of the sword on its way down. He offered the weapon to Prometheus with the handle first. Here, take this. Prometheus accepted the sword. He smiled in appreciation of the gesture, even though it would not do him much good in a real fight. Thank you. Before I go, please tell me everything about Sisyphus and Tantalus and their punishment. Prometheus listened with growing horror as the hero recounted their tales. Prometheus found his skybark in the same spot where he had left it so long ago. No mortal had dared to touch his property. He could not blame them, considering the brutal punishment meted out by Zeus for any infraction against the gods. Once he was on board, he entered the interior cabin. A cool breeze from a grate in the ceiling to refresh him. Without care, Prometheus tossed the sword into a corner. He retrieved undergarments and a leather coat from a wardrobe in the back of the cabin. There, much better. Satisfied, he moved to the front of the cabin. Opposite the window, a cushioned chair was bolted to the floor. Prometheus let himself fall into the comfortable seat. His hands reached for a console that was attached to the armrest. With a push of a few buttons, his skybark retracted its anchor and rose into the air. Prometheus heard the water dripping down the hull of his bark. The acceleration pressed him into the chair as the skybark shot straight up. Merely a few clouds obscured the sky, and the ground was nowhere to be seen in the window ahead. Tartarus lay below Earth, below Hades even, but instead of traveling through a maelstrom, Prometheus decided to travel the long way around. Since he did not expect any obstacles on his Tartarus-bound route, he transferred control to his skybark. Prometheus reclined his chair until he almost lay in a horizontal position. It would be a long journey, so he closed his eyes to catch some well-deserved rest. Prometheus awoke when his bark rocked a bit on the shores of Tartarus. He blinked a few times. His bones ached. Apparently even the comfortable reclining chair proved to be unpleasant after hours of sleep. Prometheus got up and cracked his stiff neck. He left the bark and jumped into the knee-deep water. The sky of Tartarus loomed in ominous dark purple, almost black shades above him. The water had a red hue to it, which reminded him of blood. Prometheus strode ashore. With uneasy steps on the grey gravel, he approached the gate of a structure made of black rock that rose high up into the air. This must be the prison Tartarus, he thought. Two guards waited by the gate. They regarded Prometheus with wary eyes. Who goes there? What's your business? I am the Titan Prometheus, he said with confidence. I'm here to take some prisoners home with me. The guards looked at each other, then back at him. Prometheus, they say you've been in prison for all eternity. Well, it looks like they were wrong, Prometheus said. He glared at the two men. Now step aside, I haven't got all day. When the guards did not move, he lowered his voice. For a moment I thought you defied one of the Titans. Surely that is not the case. Even the guards could not miss the unmentioned threat. When given the choice of facing Prometheus' wrath now or Thanatos' ire later, they chose the lesser of two evils. The guards stepped aside and opened the gate. Prometheus stepped into the depths of Tartarus with a grin on his face. As he walked the corridors, he witnessed depressing scenes whenever he peeked through the bars of the cells. One time, he saw the daughters of Danaus with their water buckets as they tried in vain to fill the cracked bathtub that would cleanse them of their sins. Despite the futility, they kept trying, caught in an infinite loop. Another time, poor Ixion spun around on a burning wheel. Prometheus could barely stomach the screams of the ignited man as the flames consumed his flesh. He reached for the door, but reason overpowered his compassion. If he freed Ixion now, the guards would notice from the noise alone. Sorrowful, Prometheus averted his gaze. He could not save everyone. Still, he vowed to try again on his way back. He wandered around to get a feel for the place before formulating a plan. Had he not snatched the Olympian fire without the gods' notice? Breaking out a few mortals should be easy in comparison. While planning his route, he decided that he would first release Tantalus, then Sisyphus, and finally Ixion. He debated whether he should unlock the cell of the Danaids, but his skybark would already be crammed with 4 people, let alone 50. No, releasing the 3 prisoners would have to be enough for now. At Tantalus' cell, an equally morbid display awaited him. Instead of seeing a king, Prometheus looked at a man that reminded him of a skeleton that was wrapped in wrinkled parchment for skin. The poor creature reached for a fruit that hung on the branches of a tree. It looked like he would reach the fruit, but then the branches moved farther up, denying him sustenance. Both the tree and Tantalus stood in a pool of water. Eventually, Tantalus gave up on the food. Instead, he bowed down to cup a handful of water, but before his fingers touched it, the fluid gurgled down cracks in the ground. When all the water was gone, Tantalus stood on a dry salt plain. The jagged edges of the crystals bit into his skin. Enraged, Prometheus shoved his lockpick into the opening. He turned the key as soon as the key bits had gripped the locking mechanism. Prometheus rushed to Tantalus. He passed a flask of water to the withered man, who drained it with greedy gulps. Careful, not so fast, Prometheus said. Tantalus did not heed the warning. Between coughs, he said, Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's all right, Prometheus said. He smiled and picked an apple from the tree. Here, eat something as well. Tantalus devoured the fruit. Prometheus put Tantalus' arm around his shoulder and dragged the weakened man toward the exit. We must leave this place. Come quickly. They walked through the maze-like dungeon, but had to stop every once in a while to avoid patrolling guards. Prometheus' experience as a rogue and trickster came in handy. They reached the next prison door, but before Prometheus could insert his skeleton key, Tantalus held him back. No, not him. Let's go. Come, come. Prometheus frowned. What's the matter? Tantalus pointed at the cell. This Sisyphus. He's a bad man. Prometheus nodded. I know, but so are you. I came to help you regardless. With an unpleasant, whining voice, Tantalus beseeched him. This is different. Please, we must go. No, I won't have it, Prometheus shook his head. I came here to rescue as many mortals as I can. If you don't like that, you can go back to your cell, but I won't abandon anyone. Tantalus whimpered, but did not argue the point further with Prometheus. To his surprise, the door was not locked. What's going on? Prometheus and Tantalus stepped inside of the cell. A vast barren landscape littered with hills and mountains stood before them. On the peak of many mountains, round boulders rested in precarious states. The slightest touch would cause them to topple and roll down. Prometheus' gaze wandered to a boulder that lay motionless on a plain. He needed a moment to understand what had happened. Apparently, Sisyphus had rolled the boulder up the hill so many times that eventually the boulder had leveled the hill. A voice sounded from the side. "Impressive work, isn't it?" Prometheus and Tantalus turned around to witness the approach of a muscular man with fiery eyes. Tantalus shrank back. "Oh no, he's here! Go! We must go!" Prometheus tried to tell him with a gesture to hold his peace. He addressed the newcomer. "It is very impressive indeed. I heard that Sisyphus is condemned to repeat a mindless, strenuous task that can never be completed." Sisyphus laughed at that. "Initially, that was the intention. Zeus and Thanatos were always jealous of my cunning, but I usually got the better of them. Did you know that I imprisoned the latter during their first attempt to lock me up?" Yes, Prometheus said. "That is well known and got you into even more trouble in the end. But what is this?" He pointed at the many boulders. "Oh, this!" Sisyphus laughed again and wiped a tear of joy from his eyes. "When faced with an impossible, repetitive task, I simply asked myself if there was any way to complete it. Zeus and Thanatos counted on me pushing the boulder up a mountain and then despairing as it rolled off the peak. For a while, they got their satisfaction as I repeated the same activity over and over again. But then I balanced the initial boulder at the top. Granted, it's not stable, but that wasn't one of the provisions. I completed the task and was free to go." Prometheus looked at the human and his unnerving, eerie and smug grin. "Then why didn't you leave?" Another mad laugh escaped the man's lips. "Trade in this? For nothing in the world. Only through constant practice, constant repetition, could I achieve such mastery. I'm happy where I am and—" For the first time he seemed to notice Tantalus. "Wait a moment. Why are you here? Get back to your cell!" Tantalus backed away, but before he could go anywhere, Sisyphus jumped him and put him into a headlock. "I will personally take you back." "Leave him alone," Prometheus said. Sisyphus' head snapped toward Prometheus with the look of a crazy person on his face. "He's a criminal and must serve his term." "Maybe you are a criminal too. Who are you?" Prometheus straightened. "I am the Titan Prometheus." Sisyphus' eyes narrowed. "You mean you're the traitor Prometheus? As far as I know, you were chained to a rock on Earth." "I used to be, but as you can see, I'm here now," Prometheus said. He nodded toward the grappled Tantalus. "Release him." Sisyphus shoved Tantalus to the ground. He dusted off his hands. "All right, Titan, I'll let him go. However, both of you are still not leaving this place." Prometheus snorted. "Who's going to stop us? You?" There was an evil glint in Sisyphus' eyes. Before Prometheus could defend himself, Sisyphus spun around and dropped him with a kick to the head. The stunned Prometheus dropped to the ground. He saw that Tantalus attacked Sisyphus, but a casual punch dropped the weakened man again. As Prometheus tried to get up, a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see Sisyphus' face with that sadistic smile. Sisyphus' fist connected with Prometheus' nose, and the world sank into blackness. When he awoke, someone was dragging Prometheus across the floor by his leg. Prometheus groaned as sharp stones bit into his unprotected skin. He did not wear his coat anymore. His blurry vision focused on Sisyphus, who marched on, heedless of Prometheus' discomfort. "Where is Tantalus?" "Oh, you're awake," Sisyphus said, without even turning around. "I locked him up in his cell." "There is no cell for you, but I devised something else." At their destination, Sisyphus pressed the struggling Prometheus against the face of a rock. Sisyphus twisted Prometheus' arms until they were above the Titan's head. Iron manacles snapped onto Prometheus' wrists. Truly, he was Tartarus bound, but not in the way he had imagined. You Titans and the Olympians are so alike. You're always meddling in mortal affairs. We don't need to be rescued, and we certainly don't care for being patronized. Mankind is doing fine, even without a divine benefactor. Prometheus coughed. What's going to happen to me? Sisyphus regarded him with cold eyes. You're going to serve your term. Ah, there is your warden. Prometheus heard the flapping of wings before he saw the new arrival. His heart sank when he realized that the eagle had returned to torment him for all eternity. The end.